If you have followed geek pop culture at all over the past week, you know what we're talking about today. Welcome to Panelism, the show about the comics and graphic novels worth having on your shelf, and sometimes the large conventions that are about these comic books. I'm Todd A.
I'm Taylor Trask, and you're back, sir. You're back from the great beyond, known as San Diego Comic-Con.
I am back, and surprising you with a longer intro than you knew was coming. So
yeah.
Up to my old tricks. Sorry.
Well, for another year in a row, I have not gone to SDCC, so
yeah.
I will be jealously quizzing and questioning you and trying to live through your eyes this episode as much as possible.
Yeah, I've done a... it's always weird on that because we're recording this the day I got back, so I really haven't had that like processing time yet, but so that's good and bad in different ways. But there's definitely discussion this year of like, is everybody, like all our friends going to do 4 days next year? What's, like endurance wise and what you take away from it and stuff. But overall, like my sort of like, quick review of it was I had a great time and it was a great con and I feel very satisfied with it. Like I don't leave with any regrets or anything. I think there's a lot, in that first day, it is so insane that you kind of end the first day and go, oh my God, I don't know if I can do this another year. Yeah.
Now, when you say insane, do you mean in terms of the sheer amount of stuff coming at you, or just
I think
the hypocrisy, or what's the tyranny of choice, all of that?
Yeah, exactly. The it's also, I think it's just environmentally, it's a different craziness. Like maybe if you lived in a very big city where you were on the streets all the time, like every day, in crowds, it wouldn't be that much of a change. But I would say for most of us, that's closer quarters than we're used to. And you just sort of get down there and it's hot outside and there's lines for everything. And, it just puts you in this different headspace. You can't think, I need to go to the bathroom and just go to a bathroom. It's like, I'd better go to the bathroom because I'm going to have to wait in a line in the bathroom. And then I'm going to have to meet my friends like so far away. And I'm going to have to run through a crowd to get there. And it just pushes and pulls your brain in so many directions that I think you were just exhausted, like just wiped out kind of on that first day. And I think you roll with it. At least I roll with it a little bit better the next 2 days. But I can tell you like Friday I felt more tired, like just physically, and then Saturday kind of felt like, okay, I'm reestablishing myself. Thursday, I had my Fitbit on, and Thursday we did about 7 miles walking, and I'm going back. So Friday was about 6, and then close to 7 Saturday. So yeah, I mean, that's a lot more walking than I normally do, especially when it's like in a concentrated 8 hours sort of thing.
Well, anybody who listened to your survival guide episode, which we republished last week, will, I think, be aware of all this stuff. And one of the shocking things that I learned then and then re-listening to that episode remembered is so much of this does take place outside. I think you kind of think, oh, once I'm in there, I'm in the convention center, I'm in a hermetically sealed submarine with a bunch of people. But no, you've spent a good chunk of time outside, if not most of it, I think. Is that fair?
I would say most of your time is inside.
It is? Okay.
Yeah, definitely.
Forget everything I just said.
It's just, but you're right. It's like you're not counting on the times that you're going to be outside. So this year we attended or tried to attend, or some of us attended more events at the Marriott than we ever have. Which is,
that's right.
There are these two hotels. There are actually three. There's like a Hyatt, a Hilton, and a Marriott. And Marietta is kind of connected to the convention center, but but what that results in is that like you're walking inside for most of the way there, then you have to get outside for a short period, and it's just like it's a crazy crowd that you don't have at Hilton. On the other side, like at Hilton, you have to line up outside for certain panels, so you're just standing out in the heat for 2 hours.
Yeah.
I didn't do any panels there. But so the problem with the Marriott is like it takes so much longer because you were in a crowd trying to get there the whole time. And so one of those panels, my friend Chris and I got there sort of on time. Definitely at the last minute. Like we weren't there early. And it was in a very small room, which we did not know. It was in a room we didn't was not where the normal panels were, where we'd attended. So
which panel was it?
It was about creating a board game, and I can't remember what it was.
Oh, fun.
So we did not get in because
by
the time we found the room and got there, it was packed and closed. And it turned out it was in the, but it's just that thing of like, you can't count on like where the crowds are going to be. And like, if you're going outside to try to shortcut something or whatever. So it's just, you can't count on like what chaos or not you're going to have. So it's making it from doing a 1 to 2 panel and then a 3 to 4 panel virtually impossible unless they are down the hall from each other.
So it really is like visiting Disney World. You have to figure out which rides you're going to go to at which times and which things you're going to sacrifice, and make peace with the fact that you're not going to see everything you want to see.
That is a great parallel because when I go to Disneyland, I often think, I used to have sort of a rule in my head of, well, if I get to do 4 rides, it was a good day or something, because like if there are 4 good rides or what, I can't remember what the number was, but it was always like, you're going to have an hour at each one and, you're going to have to eat and there's going to be bathroom breaks and whatever. So I think if you can do 2 panels in a day, that's probably great. But if you do more than that, I don't think you can be on the exhibit floor like at all.
Now, remind listeners and myself, like when you go, do you prefer the exhibit floor to different panels and breakout sessions, or do you like a good mix of both?
I like a mix because it's easy to be jaded and say, like you're at the Image booth and you're like, you know what, I can get all of these books at my local comic book shop. It would be better for me to do that. And like, I think those are good instincts, even though they're always going to have like some, they're going to have some like pre-release stuff and they're going to have like a special on buying multiple volumes or something like that. Or it's good to buy one if you're going to a signing or whatever. But there's always, despite that sort of jaded, like I can just get these on Amazon sort of feeling or in a local shop, there's always going to be stuff that like you don't know about that you like, And so being on the exhibit floor, while I don't know, I mean, it just provides a ton of stuff. It's like I bought freaking more RPG dice, which I definitely did not need. And could have ordered online, but the guy's right there, and it's a dice company that's in San Diego, and it was like, they're right here. They were just released. Why not get them? I didn't even know these existed, so let me get them.
Well, that happens even at smaller cons too.
Exactly.
I went to a tiny little one here in Colorado Springs last winter, and it had blizzarded, so it was very, very slow, but just even the floor space, and I would say the floor space here was probably maybe a 10th the size of San Diego Comic-Con, and that might be generous, but I still found toys and like old He-Man stuff that I'd never even heard of that I'm like, I need this, and then I was like, wait, I've just spent $50. What am I doing? and then you don't, that would be the most kind of stressful aspect to me, is just knowing what to buy when, knowing that it may be gone when you come back around again. You may not make it back to that side of the convention at some point in time. I guess in that regard, how do you shop at Comic-Con?
Oh my God.
What are you? I mean, do you go wanting specific things? Do you go just letting the magic of the event take you wherever it goes?
I go with the magic. I kind of just. It's always like I want to get something specific to the event for myself. I used to want that specific thing always to be art. But what I've realized is that I just have a shelf full of art. I don't have walls full of art because if it's not like I have a lot of art up, but if I put any more up on my walls, it's going to look ridiculous.
Yeah.
But so I want something like specific to the con that's like souvenir. So even if I buy dice that were a good deal, and like right in front of me, and it's good that I was there and I saw them in person and went, oh yeah, I want that. That doesn't count because I could have gotten that online, So I got like a limited edition set of just like pins, like enamel pins,
Oh, got it.
And just because I was like, really strictly budgeting myself. But usually I go in with like, I got to get something for my niece and nephew. And then if I end up getting a freebie, which is what happened this year, I got 2 freebies that I knew were perfect for the niece, like swag kind of stuff. And so it was like, okay, well now I got to balance that out with, what I get for the nephew. So I got to go buy a couple things for him to sort of send them, an equal amount of stuff. But that's kind of how I go in. But your example of like, not knowing something's there and then realizing it's an exclusive or a pre-release or something is perfect. And that very thing happened to my friend Chris, where he was, went in with this mindset of like, I can't get anything big today because I don't have like a bag or something to carry it. I think this was on the very first day, and went to the Star Wars like gaming booth, and he plays this game called Star Wars Armada, and they had this like new ship for it. And they told him like, well, I don't know how many. I think they told him they didn't know how many they were going to have at the con, but it wouldn't be out until weeks later or something. Like it wasn't going to be available for a while. And so he knows he paid a little bit more for it because he probably could have gotten it from Amazon or a game shop or something with a little discount. But the very next day when he went back and was talking to the person at the game booth, they said, oh yeah, we only had 15 of those. So like they're gone. And so in the moment, he didn't really have the perfect information to make that choice, but he ends up lugging this giant game box around with us for the rest of the day. So
let me ask you about that. So how does he? I mean, how aggravating is that to to him and to you guys? Is it constantly we have to like find places to sit where this thing can go? Did he get really tired of it? Did he regret that decision at the end of the day?
No, I don't think so. I must have been on Thursday because he had his San Diego backpack billboard bag, and that actually held up for him. And so he was able to put it in some sort of bag with a strap. But it is a pain, not for weight. Like weight is one thing, but I think it's like you're walking down these aisles and there's people behind you and you're constantly like they're bumping into the package on your back or you're bumping into them and feeling rude or, all of a sudden you take up like the space of like 2 people in an aisle. So I think that was frustrating. And then afterwards we were like walking downtown to a restaurant and he had to, like carry this giant bag with him and stuff. But, certainly not the worst like bag situation that any of my friends had, but just an unexpected thing. Like, oh great, now that I've found this early in the day, it's going to be with me until we get home. So that's weird. I know. I'm glad you followed up on that pain point because it fits into stuff we talked about in the preview and the survival guide. And in that I talked about those bags that they give you, and it is great. Like we all got ours on the first day and just stuffed them into the backpack, He ended up using his. I held on to mine, took it home that night and thought, this is what I'm going to use to pack up everything at the end of con and take it back. And then it's like, I can be sure it kind of lays flat, in my car, whatever, and loaded my stuff up this morning, carried it downstairs at Chris's house. Chris carried it out to my car when I was going out there and the strap broke.
Oh,
that was as far as it lasted. So if I had and this was not even like, I didn't even have a big game box or something. I had a few books and a poster tube, and that was it. If I had, done that at the con, I would have been so aggravated. And I watched this happen to several of my friends, like where a bag tore or something, and then the thing that was in it spilled onto the ground, and their book got dented or their box got a little scratch on it or something. And it's like, oh, that's so aggravating, So yeah, and I mean, if there, I know in the moment when I was on the floor, I thought, oh, this is a great tip for next year. And right now, post con processing, I can't think of any of those things. So we'll have to follow up on them in a few months or next year, so that I can be sure that we update our survival guide appropriately.
Well, while it's fresh, I want to kind of cover the high points and the low points
Yeah.
if there are any, but specifically the high points. I guess, what panels did you attend that you really liked, or what news coming out of the con did you think was interesting?
Yeah, I loved all the panels I did. So Thursday, I went to, it worked out perfectly, did like a whole morning on the floor, kind of got the lay of the land, saw everything that I wanted to see. And then I believe it was that morning went to, like, I think it was around 11 or something. We pretty much everyone that I was at con with went to an image panel, which was about horror comics in particular. And so that was the one I texted you from, because it was just like unbelievable. It was Jeff Lemire and Kieran Gillen and the author of Infidel, whose name we were unsure of how to pronounce on our episode about that, Pornsak Pinche Schott. I am so sorry that I've forgotten his ethnicity, but he's either Thai or Filipino. I believe Thai, and just a bunch of so it's all image, like writers, artists, talking about the horror genre in their comics, and it was great. Like it was really fun. I can't speak more specifically about it because I then saw Kieran Gillen in a panel the next day about writing the rules of magic, and I have both of those panels have merged into my mind. So, but there
Which
was
is apropos for Kieran Gillen, because
oh boy,
he's working on Die right now, which is everybody's.
Are you reading that, by the way?
Oh heck yeah. No,
Okay.
And our friend Drew has mentioned a few times he doesn't like the art. I love the art. I think Die is taking all the lessons that Kieran Gillen sort of figured out in Wictive, and it's stretching it out even further. Some of that world building, and specifically because it's about RPG based gaming anyway, kind of gives you a framework to work from. But I love how they're incorporating that. Did he speak to Die at all, or did he speak to Wictive at all in either panel?
Yeah, Die was the big thing that he was talking about for sure. So that, like I said, I got kind of I've melded those two panels in my mind, because this other panel I saw him on was not image specific, but it was authors talking about the rules of magic in their world, and there were more great examples from that one of how you. How you as the author have to establish that in order that everything doesn't just sort of get magically resolved from some outside power. And it was really neat because it touched on one of those things where you and I think had some friends tease us about how many times we said Deus Ex Machina in a podcast. But I think that's exactly what it's speaking to, is if the rules of magic have sort of been established, and then all of a sudden something happens that doesn't fit those rules in a magic story, then you're just as thrown off as if the story hadn't been magic and had just been reality based or something. It's the rules are kind of important. And he talked about Wictive in the terms of how it was really clearly established, with the period of years that the gods were reborn and how long they were going to live once they were reborn. And he talked about how he then set about tearing down those rules, and it was every issue or every book was about sort of disestablishing those rules, and
especially later on, he's had a lot of fun. That team has had a lot of fun in the last two volumes, and as they get closer and closer to the end, which I think is next month or September, maybe the last issue, they've gone out of their way now to take, and they did this really cool thing. Kind of minor spoilers, but they do this cool thing where they reference the very first scene in the very first issue in a very meaningful way. That scene comes back around again in a way that just completely validates all of the character development. It really logs into what the actual point of the story is, how it's going to end. It was just interesting to see him lay that groundwork and then kind of just let it sit there and then bring it back in a very intentional way. I can't say enough about what they've done with Wictive.
And it's so crazy. Also, just side note, to hear him speak about it and say, and in the past tense, when I was writing Wicked and Divine.
Because they're done. He's done.
Because he's done. They're all done. Yeah.
Yeah. They're just waiting for the publishing dates to hit.
Exactly. So and you know what? As you're saying that, I remember that one of the difficulties in like sort of differentiating these panels in my mind was that this is such a weird persnickety thing, but the audio in the first one was terrible, and for some reason the way the moderator was addressing that particular panel. So I don't know if this was like, it's just weird that all the panelists did this, but almost all of them would turn their heads to talk to the moderator rather than just speaking forwards into the microphone in front of them. So like
weird.
The volume was already low. They probably didn't know that. They're just, used to turning their heads in other panels.
That's a good moderator's job, is to basically like give everybody the lowdown on how to talk and where to look and
exactly
and all that.
And
that's interesting.
Kieran Gillen has a very thick accent, and so there were times where I just could not tell anything he was talking about. But there were great
Mexican accent, of course.
Yeah, and in the horror panel, there were great conversations about like like if you can't rely on jump scares and music and like sound cues in a horror comic, how do you make it scary? And like, what is it about it that's going to make it scary? And I thought that just really fed into the rules of magic thing, because at least what I took away from it, not being a reader of Die, is that Kieran has definitely applied those sort of rules to Die to figure out how to make this creepy, when it's not a movie, it's not a thing that he can have a sound cue or a door slam or anything like that. So I think a couple of my friends went and picked up Die. So that's definitely a book we should cover whenever you're ready for it.
I'll be ready. They just hit volume 1, 2 of the trade.
Oh, okay.
So that's, they're progressing on. It's interesting. You mentioned how do you create horror without the soundtrack and stuff. And God, Infidel is a book that certainly, like, I heard a soundtrack. I heard all of that extra stuff in my mind based on the art and then the shot, like kind of the shots and the way the cinematography of it, like really kind of created that environment where sometimes you didn't need, music or a score, and sometimes you did, and you could kind of fill in the blanks effortlessly. Yeah. I think the best books do that. We talked about Infidel quite a bit on a Halloween podcast last year, so check that one out if you're interested.
And Pinche Show talked a lot about. It was very cool. They introduced that, like they asked him about. This is a haunted house novel. And I hadn't really put it in that context, although I kind of think you did say that during our episode. But, thinking about it in the moment of seeing him and identifying him as the author of Infidel. So when they said that, it was like, oh, it all clicked. That was all the things you were talking about. And I guess what clicked was, that's so interesting because that's a genre we don't, to a great extent, we don't see that in movies. So if you're going to do a horror in a comic book, a haunted house is almost like a really cool way to do it, because it's almost like you mentioned with Die, where it's like almost like an RPG campaign or something, escape this house. Like, here it is. Here are the rules, Anyway, that was very cool. And the only other panel I saw on Thursday was I can't remember the full name, but it was like Gnomes, Gunslingers, and something, and it was about
all things that go together naturally, of course.
Yeah, it was about like
I always think about it in the same context.
It was about tabletop RPGs, and it was really fun. It was run by the host of I'm totally not sure. It's because it's crazy. It was like, I've never seen a panel run like this where the host was sort of advertising all his other stuff throughout. Like the PowerPoint that was just, randomly flipping through slides had his name everywhere. So I remember Super Geeked Up, and they do a live, like, geeky improv show, and they do it at cons, and I guess they perform elsewhere. That's great. But I don't also know if there was like a podcast or like a video or a Twitch stream or whatever. I didn't really pick up on that.
Sounds like you and I should be moderating some of these panels.
I would, call it panelism. The panelists, whatever.
Something. But real quick, let me ask you this, because as I'm looking through pictures of this year's event, I've always wondered this in general, but I think SDCC is a really good environment to really test this theory. Have they ever tried, or do you think it would be beneficial for the publishers to instead be out on the general floor with whatever booth they create, to instead create like the Boom Studios experience. So all the Boom panels, the store, the create like the artist row for Boom is all in one location. Image, same thing. Your image store, your image panels, everything is right there. Would that just be too chaotic or too hard to wrap your head around?
I think it's one of those things of like, it seems to be like traffic on the freeway. Like you can only have so many rules because it's going to have to self-organize at some point. So it was really interesting when you're at the image booth. I love this as a jumping off point because a thing you might not think about is like there aren't image panels going on all day. So when you go to the image booth, there were only like 5, for the whole weekend. And we did that Thursday, so it was very easy to like. Plus, we looked on the app, before we even got the guidebooks. Like we'd already marked what we wanted to see on the app. But we went to the booth, and I see the schedule there, and it's very easy to go. I want to go to that one, and I want to go to that one. But it also because like the Kieran was on that Rules of Magic thing, which was not an image panel. So,
got it.
In that case, it was. I wouldn't have seen everything I wanted to if I were I can see if you had like the image, room, that it might be tempting to just sort of sit there for 4 hours, but then you're going to miss out on something else because you don't know that like your favorite creator is actually, sort of breaking away from the brand that he's most associated with or something like that.
But I'm even thinking like if Image had their own room, like you could see those panels and like, who's this? It's legendary. I can't think of one right now. Like Kieran Gillen's here doing a signing or like, any of those Image creators that are pretty hardcore with Image, or any of those. Top Cow. I mean, does Top Cow have their own booth, or are they?
Yeah, they
part
do.
Of the Image
it's
they
huge.
Okay.
So one thing that is
splits it a little bit.
So they do an interesting thing, which is like a lot of times the big publishers, and even Small Press does this. It's just not as announced, but the big publishers will have signings at their booth. So on that Image schedule, there's like a separate schedule, which is like these artists will be at the Image booth. So it's very easy to just pick up their latest book and then like, wait in line to get them to sign it at a particular time. So they are doing that to some extent. Like it's just not separated from the main floor. But then one of the things that was cool this year, which I haven't experienced much, or at least I haven't taken advantage of, was so like the RPG panel was made up of real variety of like, people that were like the guy that runs the RPG meetup in San Diego was there, and a woman who does like a podcast, or I think it's a video podcast about RPGs was there, and another woman who runs another gaming group was there. So, it's like offline and online people, hosts and players, game masters and comedians, and they were all there. And then that whole panel went like announced to the room, we're going to go play these games right now.
Oh, that's
so if
cool.
you want to,
Wow.
if you want to play them, let's meet in the hallway. Like we have to give up this room, but we're going to meet in this hallway, and then we will guide you down to the game room where we're playing them all. And they each went through, like each one of them was being a game master of a particular RPG. And so they told you about that RPG. So what, on one, like, so it wasn't all Dungeons and Dragons. It wasn't all like, Pathfinder or Starfinder or something really big. They were all these like really niche RPGs. And they had all sorts of great experience. And so whenever you see that Gnomes and Gunslingers panel, because apparently they do it every year, but it may be at other cons too, I would say go check it out if you're at all interested in RPGs. It was like a really friendly way to get into it and sort of see a lot of aspects of it. But by the time that panel let out, it was like 4 p.m. We go back to the exhibit floor, walk around for a bit, and it's like 5 p.m. They're going to be closing up in an hour or so. And we're, we're like, well, what are we doing tonight? Like, what's the dinner situation? What else are we going to pick up? Because you're coming back. So then Friday, I did 2 panels. One was that Rules of Magic that I've mentioned enough, which was also very cool because it had like TV writers and comic book writers together and like novel writer, and so it was just a great perspective on like. All of their work and some pretty good guidance for authors in the crowd, but it wasn't a real deep dive into it. It was a panel. It wasn't like like you might see at I can't even think of like a coding convention where they're actually like getting you into like, here's how we're going to code this. You know,
Okay.
it wasn't instructional in that way. It was like, let's sort of bounce from along this really varied row of panelists, and you take away what you can from them all. So, I loved experiencing it, and the audio was definitely much better. I heard everything versus the horror panel. Yeah, I just wanted to give that sort of overview of like, that's more what it was like. Like, I love going to those things, but it also makes it like, if you are, trying to break into comics or something like that, it's not like you're going to get that specific information you want, like from any one of these panels. You're still going to just have to take from it what you can. And perfect example of that is I also went to one of my two favorite panels of the convention, or at least probably my favorite panel, and then I'll talk a little bit about the other one, which was the Man-Eaters panel for the comic Man-Eaters by Chelsea Kane. And you and I have mentioned this before, because this creative team, Chelsea Kane and Kate Niemczyk and Rochelle, I'm sorry, I forget her last name, they were all on the Mockingbird comic at Marvel, and which was sort of received like an outsized loaf of criticism from a specific group of people that did not like its politics, and had like kind of ignominious ending, and it ended, and Chelsea told the whole story about how she started thinking about this comic and like what to do after that, and how she wanted to keep working with that team, and how she called the team up and said, or emailed them and said, would you be interested in working on something for Image? And so this panel was just great. Unfortunately, Kate Niemczyk wasn't there, but the rest of the creative team, and actually their letterer wasn't there either. But the rest of the team was there, and they had no moderator. So Chelsea just moderated it herself. So they told the whole origin story of the comic, gave a really good overview of how they all work together. It was just like, it's phenomenal. And that comic I am going to talk about in a separate episode very soon. And I will talk to you more about that panel when we talk about the comic. But I'll just say that like one of the most surprising to me, because I knew a lot of this backstory. Like I had read Mockingbird before Man-Eaters came out, so I put it on my pull list like as soon as it was announced. And like I've been pulling the single issues, and I only recently kind of read everything together and just got behind this book and went, this is rules. I did not know this. 3 of the creative team so there's like 8 women on the creative team. There's 1 man. But 3 of those women are 14-year-old girls.
What?
It is Chelsea's daughter, who's a writer, and I guess Chelsea had gone to her and talked to her about like, I want kind of like a poem from a 13-year-old girl that's kind of angsty, and it's about this. And so her daughter would write it for her. And then she meets one of her other friends, and she knew she was an artist and was always sketching stuff, and said, let me see your sketches. And then there was this other friend who her daughter had told her had all these awesome haikus about a dead samurai, and got a B on her English project. And Chelsea was like, let me see those haikus. And then she put those in the book, and then hired her to write more haikus. And so there was this great story of like, I mean, it just touched on everything. It's like the book, which we'll talk about in depth, it has to do with girls that age. And so Chelsea at once like recognized like, I need girls that age to inform me about what they're going through. And she had already seen it like with her daughter. So she already sort of knew that world, but she brought in the voices to do it. And it was just like so spectacular. And then this was another of those panels where they said, hey, when this ends, we are all going over to this pavilion and sitting at this table and autographing stuff. So just come follow us. So I did that. I haven't done that before, because usually when I've been in panels and stuff, they have they did have a set autograph time after the panel, but I've seen those people who are, at such a level that if you're not already in line for the autograph, you're not going to get in line. So I went to this autograph signing right after this. They gave us all like little cat ear headbands. They gave us a suggestions for the patriarchy slip that we could fill out and drop in their suggestion box or take it with us. And they all signed a poster. Kate Niemczyk, the penciler, was not there, but I'm sorry, I forget her last name, but Stella, who's the 14-year-old who does a lot of the illustrations, drew a little drawing on it, and it's just very cool. And like you have this moment of like I got to walk down and tell Rochelle like I loved Mockingbird, and I tell Leah like I loved her graphic design in this book, and they are ending it at issue 12, and I hope and I'm pretty sure Image will do this, but I hope they just release it as one collected volume, because right now there's
God, I hope so too. That you know, more and more Image has titles, and we've talked about them before, where it's necessary. I think Infidel was itself a totally complete work,
a standalone.
Standalone, and Image needs to do more of that, and especially because so many of their pieces, are really good, but you can only enjoy them in the context of an entire volume.
Yeah.
I always come back to two titles. They're Not Like Us and Nowhere Men, which coincidentally were written by the actual editor-in-chief of Image, and yet they had to stop them because the single issues weren't selling well, because many people, myself included, love to read. It's such a story that you have to read it in one sitting.
Yeah.
I don't know why they're so opposed to that.
Well, and I bet it's sales driven. I doubt they're opposed to anything that makes sense in that way, because they did at the booth have, Saga continues to put out the giant hardback books. What was the other new?
Yeah, but that's already happened, right? Like Saga's already like spent the time. I'm talking about like, hey, I have a vision for a story. It should just be a one volume thing, and not have to come out in 5 separate issues over 6 months.
Yeah, I'm curious about those stories, because 12 is a weird number to end on, because the Image trades and the way Image does their arcs is usually 5 issues. So trades 1 and 2 of Maneaters only cover 10 issues. So that means there's only 2 outstanding issues, which would be kind of foolish to put in a separate paperback trade. Yeah. So it just seems logical that like after those 2 are released, they're going to put all of them together in an omnibus. And so I'd like to know the conversation behind that. Like, did the team think that they would keep going after 12? Did they decide that 12, like once they got into it, that 12 was where to end? Because hearing Pinche Show talk the day before, or I guess it was the day before, it sounds like his next project is a standalone again. So I think creators with those, and maybe it has to do with the following, or like how many they're going to print, or what, who knows. Like, it would be great to know those nuts and bolts, but at least he seems able to pitch sort of graphic novels versus ongoing series. And so I'd like to know how that happens. Maneaters, I will just talk. Go ahead.
We've got another example, which is Drawn and Quarterly, which only deals in collected, single volumes of stuff. So it's interesting that Image wouldn't allow, either create a subdivision or at least proportionally publish things.
Yeah.
Because they could have everything. They could have, hey, we have these really great single issue series that are going on and on and on, a la Walking Dead, a la Saga. We also do these really great like start to finish pieces that maybe there's 3 volumes that come out over the course of 5 years, but each one is a single drop.
Yeah.
Drawn and Quarterly just made a great deal of that. Let me ask you this though, because I want to transition a little bit. Did Drawn and Quarterly have a booth? Did you see?
They have a huge booth.
What's that like? Is it just like a Drawn and Quarterly store?
It's like a bookstore. I mean, it's
that's where I would just fall off into the ocean and like literally be carrying around like a giant box of stuff.
Well, right. That's actually like it probably hurts them at a con like San Diego, because their books are so beautiful, but they are all hardcover and heavy. Yeah. And they do have some paperbacks. I did not actually buy anything.
Would you buy
at the booth
paperback from Drawn and Quarterly?
I know. I was going to say I didn't buy anything because the one I had my eye on, they only had as a paperback, and then they had another a Tom Gold book that was signed, but he wasn't there to sign it, and I was kind of like, you know what, like. The price of me getting this is that I walk around with it all day, when I can just, how much does like the non-personalized signature matter to me? But yeah, I'll touch on all the Maneater stuff in another one. in another podcast episode. The last thing I did on Friday was I demoed this game called Tiny Towns that was really fun, and that's a part of Comic-Con that we rarely talk about, which is this whole mezzanine level is dedicated to gaming, like board gaming, tabletop gaming. And so there's a big, huge demo room where you can just walk in and sit down at a table and demo a game with someone who will teach you all the rules, and you're actually like playing the game. And first of all, it's a great way to cool off and sit down for an hour.
I'm sure.
And secondly, like, it's just interesting to, to find these new games, and that's a whole, creative endeavor that rarely associated with Comic-Con, but is definitely there. And I think the reason it's not associated is because it's a little bit invisible. It's like there's a floor on the exhibit floors on the bottom floor, and the meeting rooms are on the top floor, and no one thinks about this mezzanine level in between, like, except to get from one to the other. So it's a little overlooked, but it's that was fun. And then Saturday, in a tie for my second favorite panel was, I went to this one called The Fundamentals of Storytelling, which had a really diverse group of authors. All I can assume is that they are all somehow associated with the same publishing, which literally just jumped out of my head. I cannot think of it. But I was so pleased to learn that there was going to be a panel with Sarah Anderson, whose comics are called Sarah Scribbles on Instagram. And I reviewed her book, Adulthood is a Myth, on episode number 58. And you can find her at Sarah Anderson Comics, Anderson with an E. She was on this panel. So was Whitney Gardner, whose novel Chaotic Good I reviewed in episode number 84, and you can find her at Hey Whitney Writes. And so was Mr. Thomas Lennon, whom you probably know as Lieutenant Jim Dangle from Reno 911.
Interesting. Wow.
He has written a YA novel which sounds amazing, about a Irish teenage boy who's an intern with the police, and it's a very narrow boy, and he learns that he can slip through this like narrow entrance in this particular castle, and finds out where the leprechauns live. And then it's this great. Then the police invite him to join their like anti-leprechaun magic unit, and so it has all these like. So on one hand, it's like full of this.
Forget a YA novel. I want to see this as a TV. I want to see this as a web short.
Well, it's a series. There's going to be 3 novels apparently.
Yeah, but I don't want to read it. I want to see it. Like that seems like it's so much more oriented towards physical comedy.
Yeah. For sure. It's almost too absurd, but it has a lot of real Irish myth, as well as like his sort of humorous takes on all of it. And so it was like, fun fact, Thomas Lennon sat in my lap and sang a song at a Comedy Bang Bang.
What?
Comedy Bang Bang performance a few years ago.
I've never heard this story. You need to explain. You can't just drop that.
No, we'll just drop that. I would love to explain it if I had a chance to explain it to him. I went up afterwards, and unfortunately, he had to run. But this panel too was one of those great ones where they said, "Hey, everybody, follow us to the autograph table." So I picked up Sarah Anderson's new book. So Adulthood is a Myth, if you remember, and she's got several of these Sarah Scribbles collections, is like a intentionally primitive comic strip, like very Instagram friendly. They're funny. They're sort of from her real life, and in a like sort of a pessimistic 20-something who's like just has problems with her hair or problems with her cat, or like it shows off her geek side too much around her friends or whatever. But her new book is a collaboration with Andy Weir, who wrote the frickin' Martian. Yeah,
what the heck?
So
that seems
he wrote like a YA novel comic book sort of script, I guess. Oh my God, they all flipped out of my head too. But it's Dorothy, Wendy, and Alice, who are all sentenced or taken to live in like a girls' home to be like, remediated.
Wow.
But they still have their actual magic powers, and so trouble ensues.
Wait, Dorothy from Oz,
yes.
Wendy from Peter Pan, and Alice obviously from Alice in Wonderland.
Yes.
Is it one of those things where it's like, hey, no one believes that they went through these fantastical things,
right?
Or is that
they're crazy women that are,
which I love because There was a string of that in the original L. Frank Baum books, not deliberately, but enough where the movie Return to Oz, which stars Fairuza Balk, late '80s movie, one of my favorite '80s kids movies. That movie really starts with, "Hey, Aunt Em and Uncle Henry don't believe Dorothy. She won't stop talking about this. We're going to take her into town to get electroshock therapy because she's crazy."
Wow.
And I mean, that's how that movie begins. I've always thought that was an interesting premise to play out even further, and I'm happy to see it. I mean, with Andy Weir, that's woof.
It's amazing. So I don't think it was. She didn't talk too much about it, but what I gathered was it doesn't sound like she knew him and they collaborated on this. It sounds more like he had this idea and wanted, a younger illustrator to do it, and her company, like her publishing company, I guess suggested her, and she got to work on it. So that is called Cheshire Crossing, but. So I went to the autograph signing. I had Whitney's new graphic novel, which is called Fake Blood, which she wrote and illustrated, and got both of them to, sign. So I will talk about both of those on later episodes. After Maneaters, I've got my work cut out for me for the next month or so. But that was definitely that was a favorite panel, just in the sense of first of all, afterwards I introduced myself to Whitney, and she was just lovely, and remembered our podcast, and was even like, yeah, it was like Coffee and Comics or something. So,
that's cool. She remembers us. Yeah.
Yeah. And yeah, just, great to meet her in person and have that connection. And, I had no idea that these three people would be on this one panel. So that was just such a delight to find that. And after that, I had that feeling that I've had at many Comic Cons where I was like, that's it. I don't need anything else today. I had another panel on my list, and it kind of came down to, do I go to their autograph signing or do I run to meet this other panel? And who is on that panel but Kieran Gillen? And I was like, I've already seen that guy twice. And I'm sure it would have been a fascinating panel, but I thought this is the better experience. And so I just got in line and for the autographs and did that. And afterwards, went downstairs and went, these are the two things that I got to get for my nephew. One of those, I wanted to get him something from the Mouse Guard creator. And when I went to his table, he was standing right there. So I got to have a little chat with David Peterson and tell him.
Now, did you ask him about the now aborted movie? And how
I did
sad
not.
he was
I did
about
not.
that?
It was about how I loved his work and had only recently gotten into it, but I was so thankful that he's, got so much of it for me to absorb. He has a couple of kids books, which he has written that happen in the world of Mouse Guard. And he's gotten an illustrator who stays very much within his style, but it's, that at least allows him to move a little bit quicker. And I heard him explain to someone else who was in front of me, about this other comic book that I've been curious about, The Legends of the Guard, which is written by other people, but sort of stays in the world, and he has two board games out. There's a Mouse Guard RPG that's in its second edition. And then there is this other sort of chess game, and they were both there. And it was that classic conundrum of, Chris and I looked at this RPG and went, I want this. It would be great to have him sign this. It is so beautifully done. But then I got to lug this really heavy box around for the rest of the day.
Sure.
So, but anyway, I saw this panel, just felt like that was all the great experience that I wanted, ran downstairs, grabbed the last couple of things like gifts on my list, and was able to just sort of enjoy the last couple of hours of con and think this is perfect.
Now, you didn't do any Hall H panels, but there was a pretty big one this year involving Marvel, which I think last year didn't really even have a presence because...
I don't think they were at Hall H last year.
I mean, that makes sense, too, because Infinity War had just happened. Half the Marvel Universe was dead.
Yeah.
There really wasn't much for them to say.
Yeah, they weren't going to spoil anything,
Yeah, no, this year, man, they just kind of dropped everything. They released the next 5 movies in Phase 4, and then got a lot more in detail on the 5 sort of starting TV show.
Yes.
Just 5 series on the Disney Plus subscription service. I'll just tell you what was interesting to me. Actually, there were 6 series. Because is Blade a series or a movie? Blade's a series.
I believe it's a series with Mahershala Ali.
Yeah, which makes total sense. But the ones that really stuck out to me are we'll go in reverse order. Thor: Love and Thunder, which once again sees Taika Waititi return, which is the exact right move. But more interestingly, this would have been something I would have kept secret, so I'm surprised they decided to let it out. But Natalie Portman is back as Jane Foster, and she's gonna be Lady Thor, or just Thor if you want to go that route. Like she's gonna they're gonna go down that road. No idea if she's gonna have cancer or anything like that. That would be interesting if they went that route with it. But does that shock you, surprise you, or I mean, you're a big Lady Thor fan, so how do you feel about all this?
As I like to denominate them, she is Thor and he is Boy Thor.
Okay.
So there was just this great moment because, of course, you don't hear that news while you're at the con because you're too busy doing other stuff. So even when I was seeing stuff come into like notifications, I'm like just swiping it away unless it's a friend telling me where they are. So we go home last night and we're all seeing the Marvel news as it's delivered through like blogs and tweets and stuff individually. And we somehow heard about the female Thor before we knew it was actually Natalie Portman. And so I had the time to have a short discussion of like, what if it were Natalie Portman? What if they did the female Thor story? So I had that whole moment of being able to be like, oh, I so hope it's Natalie Portman and they do that. Because our other nomination, which would have been fantastic, but would have probably gone a different way, would be have Valkyrie pick up the hammer. But I think the quorum of people who were discussing this last night were mostly in agreement that going the dark route with Natalie Portman and doing the cancer story would be really amazing for Thor. And so it's hard to hope that they do something that dark, but it would.
Which is tricky with Taika Waititi running things. I mean, not that he can't do it, but just it's interesting to see if he pulls it off and if how he balances the humor and the dark side.
Well, I think like A Hunt for the Wilder People is like that really in that it's in his wheelhouse. There is a sad, funny movie, I wasn't clear, and maybe you can clarify this. Is Jane Foster going to pick up the hammer in Love and Thunder?
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, that's it. No. That was revealed. She even came out. Natalie Portman came out holding the hammer. That's like,
Gotcha.
No, she's gonna be Thor too, just
Nice.
like in the comics. So they're going that way. The other movie that really jumped out at me, because I didn't even know it was gonna be a movie, was Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings.
Yes.
Which is just like, apparently they cast the guy literally last week.
Wow.
And the main guy, and more interesting for me, this is finally where they're going to debut the real actual Mandarin, not the the dude, not Ben Kingsley from the Iron Man 3, which I freaking loved, by the way. I love that twist, because you just can't, in a movie about high technology, it's really hard to introduce a mystical Asian figure with 10 magical rings. That it would have gotten in the way. So to see them bring it in this way is interesting. I wonder if they're going to acknowledge the events of Iron Man 3 in any way or not, or how does this work? I didn't even know this is a thing they were pursuing, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh no, that's a movie, here it comes. That was interesting. All the other movies we've talked about here and there. The Doctor Strange horror movie is also interesting.
Well, I would say one of the other standouts for me was learning that they were going to do What If as an animated series.
Yes, I was just about to talk about that. That's fascinating because they can bring back Robert Downey Jr. to voice Iron Man or Tony Stark if they wanted to. He doesn't have to appear. And they can do all these crazy things, get continuity from their actors, but then also not have to spend $800 million to do recreations of movies we've already seen.
Well, and as I understand, they announced like this will not be in continuity. So
no, because it's all multiverse. Like, hey, this could have happened. This could have happened.
So it basically, they are just stating like, we are going to tell all the stories we want to in a crazy like animated way.
Do you think? I mean, this is fascinating. I've mentioned before that the use of Disney Plus to expand on the MCU was a really good thing. Like, we're going to get to see the Falcon and Winter Soldier series and the WandaVision, which if they can make WandaVision anything like that amazing Vision graphic novel we've just talked about.
For me, if they just make it like Endgame. like just the little glimpse we got at Wanda and Vision and that, like,
Yeah,
that
true.
I liked that.
Yeah.
What flipped my decision on Disney Plus is that what I understand to be true is that they announced their price is under $8. So
For now, yeah.
it's either $6.99 or $7.99, and I went, now that makes sense to me. Another like $15 a month service is just too much. Like I feel like,
I mean, it's going to be 15 before it's done, though. I mean, this is introductory pricing. I mean, it's introductory pricing, but a hell of a deal. Just with even if it was just this new stuff, all the Mandalorian, all these kinds of things.
Yeah.
That might be interesting. But it's everything in the Disney Vault. Not at first. They're going to slow roll it in, but
they are.
They're not going. It's not just going to be every movie right out of the gate. They're going to slowly add.
Never
to the library.
mind.
Yeah, which I don't quite understand the rationale behind that. Like, why not just maybe to highlight, make it seem like new things are coming every month. There might be some.
Yeah, because otherwise you just subscribe when you want to catch up on everything, and then you unsubscribe.
Yeah, so that might make sense. What I hope they don't do is put things back in the vault. Like, no.
Yeah.
If Lady and the Tramp is on the Disney Plus thing, it stays there forever as long as Disney Plus is a thing. You don't take it away and bring it back again. This isn't the home video days, for God's sake.
Yeah, it's exactly.
I'm
But
also interested, though, like the Hawkeye series is apparently going to take place when he was Ronin. The Blade series, I had no idea was even coming. So just the idea that they can take these characters now that we've spent 8 to 10 years with and give them continuations in their story arcs, but in a serialized format where it's maybe less big budget. They can take more time. Like, I'm really super. It was the TV side of it I was more interested in the movie side. I'm sure the movie side will be fun and interesting, and I'll probably go to a couple of those. But it's the serialized stuff that I'm really interested in.
Yeah.
And we're getting ever closer to. I've always dreamed about the day where a creative company can, from the inception, launch a multimedia property where it's books, comics, movies, TV, podcasts, whatever it is, all from the get-go, and they all touch a different medium and they all connect together. I think we're going to get close. I mean, this is one more step to that, where I would even imagine, like, if they wanted to do Miles Morales, they could launch the Miles Morales TV show, and then the first Spider-Man movie with Miles Morales might be, after 3 seasons of the show, hey, here's the movie, and then they'll go back to the show again, and maybe there's this run of comics that complements that or fills in the gaps.
Yeah.
We're so close to that being the case, and they've sort of just very carefully laid the bridge work to it, and I don't know. It just makes me more sort of disappointed that DC can't do that, largely because Warner Brothers is going to take away the DC Universe app soon and just launch some other.
Yeah.
They're launching like HBO Plus or whatever the hell they're putting
Max.
on HBO and Max. Oh Christ! I mean, just everything that Warner Brothers is doing with their streaming makes no sense. And here Marvel is crafting the perfect beast, and they're still at it, and it's still just going to keep growing.
Yeah, one more surprising thing from Marvel is the announcement of a Fantastic Four movie.
Yeah, but we knew that. I mean, they just said, "Oh, it's coming." There was no details released.
Well, right, but I mean,
there's we're gonna do it.
There's not an exact release date, but it's on the timeline now.
Yeah.
So
yeah, there wasn't a logo for it or anything. They're just like, "Hey, it's coming to that," and Captain Marvel 2 and Black Panther 2 and Guardians 3. Like, all those movies were the least interesting. Like, I'm glad we didn't see a bunch of logos for sequels up there. Like, everything they talked about, with the exception of Doctor Strange, is new. And Thor. Sorry, Thor and Doctor Strange were new, sequels, but then Black Widow, Eternals, Shang-Chi.
Yeah.
The Eternals. I mean, the Eternals is just going to be like this big question mark until it actually comes out, because I have no idea like what that could even entail. Is it going to be just totally trippy? Is it going to be grand storytelling on like an epic level? Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
Who knows?
Just a quick, hitting some lightning points. I thought the Picard trailer was wonderful. You and I were talking about it before. So we have a different take on it because you have kept up with the Star Trek universe and know where Picard's story, where we last left off. I didn't. So sort of just to me, it was more about seeing Patrick Stewart coming back into that role and how do they tell a new story with that. And I was like, hey, I can get behind this. Not that I'll watch it, but I thought the trailer was great. And then the Watchmen trailer, I had very similar feelings. where
Is there a new Watchmen trailer? I didn't know
yeah,
they put a new one out. I'm gonna have to watch that one next.
it's more involved, and it teases Dr. Manhattan being a part of this series.
Oh, good.
But well, I'll be interested in your take after you watch it, because I felt like we don't even need it. We don't even need Dr. Manhattan or anything like that. From watching it, I felt like it's the Watchmen universe, but it can stand on its own kind of thing and not force us to remember the graphic novel. And also, I heard in one of the panels that Alan Moore retired from comics on the first day of Comic-Con.
Oh, interesting. Like officially, I know he's been talking about it for a little while.
Yeah.
So was that news only that like the first day, or would they?
It was news only in that like a panelist mentioned like, hey, I don't know if you heard, but Alan Moore announced this.
That's fascinating. Well, and he's been talking about. I mean, he's been doing novels.
It was not
anyway.
surprising to me.
Yeah, and he's been talking about. He's not that he's run out of things to say, but he sort of has gotten from comics as a medium everything he wants. I think he's also very burned out at everybody misadapting his work, in his opinion.
Yeah.
So and in reality too, the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen was, I think, the biggest blow to him. I don't know if he's never watched the Snyder Watchmen movie. I wonder what he'd think of it if he ever did. I mean, I'm sure he's that, like many fans, like it shouldn't have never been adapted at all. It's like fine, but for an adaptation, it was pretty loyal. I think more and more, it's less movies and more these series that are captivating my imagination. I think a lot of others at SDCC. This is because just think about that. There wasn't a lot of movies that were like, oh my god, it's the trailer for the movie I've been waiting my whole life for. There wasn't a lot of that this year. It was all series. It was all serialized things on screen.
Yeah, I mean, you and I definitely like have different anticipation levels for that, because as we'll talk about on another upcoming episode, like Stranger Things 3 was unbelievable.
Yeah.
But the preview for The Witcher on Netflix, like I felt like, why is this a series? I'm not that I'm familiar with the books or anything, but I don't understand why especially when it's Netflix. Like you could just make it a 4 long episodes or something. You don't need to package it as a series. I'll be interested to see how. The cynic in me wants to say how quickly that tanks, but I'll be interested in see what the reception is, because I wasn't aware of the property at all, but like there was a ton of art from it, and the Dark Horse, who put it out, I guess, or put out some sort of extension of it or something, had art at their booth, and so I thought all that art from The Witcher was really locked down, and then when I saw the trailer, I was like, this does not live up to what I just saw on a busy convention floor. Like, how are you going to do this, Netflix? So I'm still like hedging my bets when it comes to series. I do think the right way to go is to do things like the Hawkeye series, where they say it's only going to be 6 episodes, or it's only going to be 8 episodes or whatever. And just, or The Mandalorian too is like only 6 episodes, I think. So just,
Which is great, because Netflix, I mean, one of the problems with the Netflix Marvel series were they were always 4 or 5 episodes too long.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
It's great that Disney Plus is like, hey, they don't have to be consistent. This one can be 5. This one can be 12.
And hopefully they embrace that thing of like, Hawkeye can come back in another series that's another 6 episodes or something, but it's not an ongoing like season to season thing. It's just, Hawkeye Ronin, or, Hawkeye the New Girl, or whatever. Yeah.
When it gives them more money per episode too, which, I mean, in some ways this could be bad. It could be, that's one of the reasons Game of Thrones final season was not as good, is that fewer episodes, higher production value, but less direction. So it could be a double-edged sword.
Yeah. Yeah.
I guess to wrap up, where does this rank with other SDCCs you've attended? Is it better?
For the past
Same.
few years, and I've said this in other episodes, I feel like a lot of it has to do with just sort of understanding the amount of input I can handle over con. And it took me many years to figure that out. But for the past several years, I've come away from every con feeling very satisfied. And like, I had little unique experiences. I didn't like set expectations for myself, or like design an experience that I would be frustrated if I didn't have. So, yeah, I just walked away feeling like, great, that was perfect. You know, I can go home and not feel like I missed out on something. And there have definitely been cons where I'm there on Sunday, sort of dragging myself around the floor, feeling like I haven't seen everything yet, you know? So it was great that way. And I, you know, like I said, hopefully after my brain digests all the input it received over the last 4 days, I can come up with some new survival tips and we can freshen that up next year.
Great. Well, I hopefully, fingers crossed, next year I'll be able to join you, and then we can do a live podcast from the floor or somewhere thereabouts, and actually make it happen for once.
I would, yeah. I would be all in favor of not doing anything from the floor because I want to punch so many people with their dumb smartphones on a stick shooting their like vlog from the floor.
Oh,
yeah, it's right. Like everybody thinks they're in the media now. I mean, they are. I don't mean to, you criticize that too much, but it's just like I don't know. It's gotten to like it's almost at the rude level.
Yeah, where I'm sure you just everywhere you turn, it's just constantly that.
Yeah,
I would be compelled, especially if I was in cosplay, I would be compelled to photobomb every single one of them. That would be fun.
I would feel, a couple notes. That's great. I think we could do something during the con, but maybe not on the floor.
Yeah, no.
But I thought you reminded me, cosplay this year, big hit, or sorry, maybe not hit, but very popular, Fat Thor. Everywhere. Fat Thors everywhere. Friday, there were too many Fat Thors. The best one I saw.
Too many Fat Thors. That's the episode title here. Too many Fat
yeah.
Thors. SDCC 2019.
Best one I saw was, many of them were wearing the sweater, you know, or all of them sweater. Were really. But the best one I saw was wearing Jeff Lebowski's sweater and had made a hammer that was a bowling ball.
Oh, fantastic!
So
that sweater was close. I mean, it was close enough in the movie.
So just one guy was like Lebowski Thor. Everyone else, we were like on Friday going, okay, I'm done. I've seen enough of these. It was like the freaking Joker from Dark Knight year, you know, where you're like, I get it. We all saw the movie. You're not going to do it in a new way. Other surprising. So we went into Saturday thinking we were going to see even more Fat Thors. No, what we saw was we'd seen one of these on Friday. We saw Steve and Robin from Scoops Ahoy, and we were like, holy crap. That's amazing. Like the Stranger Things Scoops Ahoy uniform.
Yeah.
How did you get that together in time for this? And then Saturday saw about a dozen of them. So my guess is that someone is selling those costumes because I also saw a Camp Nowhere, like head to toe Dustin from Stranger Things, a woman doing that. And I was like, oh, that's amazing. And then the next day saw like 3 or 4 more and was like, what? I guess these shirts are on sale somewhere, you know, I didn't know. So
random side story. In addition to me being absolutely jealous about your SDCC experience, my wife's going to Los Angeles next weekend, and she's going to see at the Hollywood Bowl. Apparently, this is a thing where they will do a limited weekend engagement of different musicals.
Yep.
And stunt cast it, kind of like when Jason Reitman used to host a live reading of different screenplays in Los Angeles for about 5 years. I forget what it was called, but it was very popular. So they would do like The Big Lebowski, where Michael Fassbender was Jeff Lebowski, and like they do these amazing casts. Go to Wikipedia and look at some of those. By the way, they're fantastic. But she is singing Into the Woods, and Dustin from Stranger Things, I forget his real name, he is going to play Jack, it's
Gayton is his first name. I can't remember his last name.
I can never pronounce the last name for whatever reason. But that'll be fun. She'll get to see that. I'm just anytime somebody goes to Southern California, I'm very.
That should be awesome. He's a big musical kid. He was in Les Mis on Broadway.
Was he? I didn't realize this.
Yeah, check him out on YouTube. It's pretty crazy to watch like an 8-year-old Dustin like walking around a huge New York theater, like, you know, showing people around.
Well, and there's more. I mean, if you watch Stranger Things season 3, there's another musical moment involving him towards the end that was both surprising, off-putting, and delightful all at
Yeah,
once.
and perfect. Yeah, exactly.
Know how they can pull it off. Well, let's leave it there. More to talk about, I'm sure, as we get into other episodes. You'll probably have
absolutely the echo of this will
and
continue for several episodes.
Where can folks find all our episodes, Todd, if they want to delve into the archive or
hey, find us anywhere podcasts are listened to. We are Panelism, and we are on the web at panelism.inc, and we are on Instagram at panelism.inc. I threw up some pictures from the con Friday morning, and I've got some more to sort of sift through and edit that will probably come along this week. So check us out there. It's a great place to find us.
Fantastic. And subscribe, share, tell your friends, give us feedback. We actually love feedback. So if there's something you like, something you hate, a book you want us to review, if you're a creator and you want to be on the show, let us know. We'll be doing more interviews pretty soon too. So lots to come, and I guess I'll see you then.